Stop! What are you doing?
I screamed at 6:17 a.m., barefoot in pajamas, bolting down my driveway as HOA President Victoria Pemberton slammed a crowbar into my visitor's pickup truck. Crash. Windshield shattered. Glass sprayed everywhere. She whipped around, pristine tennis skirt now smeared with oil, and snapped.
This junk is tanking our property values!
Crash. Side mirror gone.
That's not my truck.
Don't care whose trash it is.
She scratched, "Get out," deep into the door. Metal screeching like nails on chalkboard. Neighbors' doors cracked open, phones up, recording everything. 8 years of her petty rules, fines, and towing tantrums. And now this felony, caught on camera. She had no clue whose truck she was destroying. When I finally told her, loud and clear, who the owner really was, she froze mid-swing, crowbar dangling, all color drained from her face. What would you do if your HOA president lost it like this? Where are you watching from? And what's your craziest HOA or neighbor story? Let me back up and tell you how we got here. Because this wasn't just some random act of vandalism. This was the inevitable explosion of 8 years of corruption, intimidation, and petty tyranny. My name's Riley Castellanos, and 18 months ago, I bought my little slice of suburban paradise in Willowbrook Estates. Fresh off a brutal divorce that left me financially gutted, I needed somewhere quiet to rebuild my life. The neighborhood looked perfect. Manicured lawns, friendly families, reasonable HOA fees of $285 a month. What I didn't know was that our HOA president, Victoria Pemberton, ran this place like her personal North Korea. Victoria was 58 with that particular shade of bottle blonde that screams, "I peaked in high school," real estate agent by day, neighborhood dictator by night. The smell of her cloying perfume, too sweet, too strong, announced her presence 3 houses away. Married to a retired police captain, which she dropped into every conversation like a verbal hand grenade. The smell of fresh mulch and sprinkler mist couldn't mask the tension that hung over our cookie-cutter paradise. Every morning, the distant hum of leaf blowers mixed with Victoria's sharp voice echoing across courtyards as she prowled the streets looking for violations. The scratch of her pen on citation slips had become the neighborhood's most dreaded sound. Week 2 of living there, I got my masterclass in Victoria's special brand of justice. I'm coming home from a 12-hour shift fixing MRI machines, dead tired, when I see this bright yellow violation notice fluttering on my door like a surrender flag. $150 fine for non-compliant mailbox color. I stared at that notice, then at my mailbox, then at the 30 identical mailboxes lining my street. All the same faded navy blue. I actually counted them. "Yeah, I'm that petty," called Victoria immediately. "Ma'am, my mailbox is identical to everyone else's." "Faded navy appears black in certain lighting conditions," she said, using that tone teachers reserve for particularly slow children. "It's clearly stated in our aesthetic guidelines, section 4.2.7. The metallic taste of injustice lingered as I wrote that first check. But hey, new guy, play nice, pick your battles, right? That was my first mistake. Over the next few months, I watched Victoria's operation unfold. She had a system: target the single guys, the minorities, anyone who looked like they might not have the time or money to fight back. Mrs. Chen got fined for excessive garden vegetables. Her tomatoes were apparently too ethnic. The Johnson family somehow always had improperly positioned garbage cans. Funny how that only happened to the interracial couple. Meanwhile, Victoria's cronies could park RVs in their driveways for months without a whisper of complaint. I learned Victoria had excellent motivation for squeezing every penny from residents. Her husband's pension was smaller than expected, real estate wasn't exactly booming, and she'd gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Those HOA president perks, salary bumps, expense accounts, kickbacks from preferred vendors, helped bridge the gap between her champagne taste and beer budget. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed when I met Maria. Maria Thornfield was everything I thought I'd never find again after my divorce. Smart, funny, beautiful, and actually interested in a slightly broken medical equipment technician covered in machine grease. We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She mentioned working in legal but kept things vague. I figured paralegal, maybe court clerk. Our relationship grew slowly, carefully. She'd stay over on weekends, sometimes during the week. Her truck, a practical Ford F-150 with government plates I never really noticed, became a familiar sight in my driveway. That's when Victoria's attention laser-focused on me. See, Victoria had very specific ideas about what kind of people belonged in Willowbrook Estates. And a divorced Hispanic guy dating a woman who drove a pickup truck, that didn't fit her vision of our upscale community. The real war was about to begin. The first shot in Victoria's war against me came disguised as community improvement. 3 weeks after Maria and I made things official, I woke up to a cheerful notice in my mailbox. New guest parking guidelines, effective immediately. The smell of fresh printer toner couldn't hide the stench of targeting. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. Guest vehicles could park on neighborhood streets for a maximum of 48 hours in any 30-day period. Violations would result in $75 daily fines retroactive to the date of infringement. I read it twice, stomach-dropping. Maria's truck had been parked outside my house for 3 days straight that week. "This is insane," I told Maria over dinner. "It's like she's monitoring my driveway with a stopwatch." Maria raised an eyebrow, that sharp, analytical look I was starting to recognize. "Did she get membership approval for these new rules?" Membership approval? HOAs can't just make up rules on a whim. There are procedures. She caught herself, backpedaled with a slight smile. "I mean, I've had to deal with some property law stuff before." The next morning brought Victoria's first parking violation, fluttering under my windshield wiper like a death threat. $225 for Maria's 3-day violation. The paper felt expensive. Victoria wasn't skimping on her revenge stationery. I remembered something from my divorce proceedings. My lawyer had mentioned that any rule changes needed proper documentation and voting procedures. Most associations couldn't just impose new restrictions without following their own bylaws. It was worth checking out. Time for some reconnaissance. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting every guest car on every street in Willowbrook Estates. Early morning walks became my new hobby. Coffee in one hand, smartphone in the other. The crunch of gravel under my sneakers marked time as I cataloged Victoria's hypocrisy like some suburban private investigator. The results were absolutely beautiful. Victoria's son's friends had parked 5 cars outside her house for 6 days straight during a college party. Her book club regularly clogged Maple Street with overnight guests. One silver Mercedes had been there 9 straight days. Her brother-in-law's work truck had been parked on Elm Avenue for 2 weeks while he helped with renovations. 0 violations issued. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen got fined because her daughter visited for 3 days. The Johnsons got hit for their son's weekend stay. Every single target was a minority family or someone who'd previously questioned Victoria's authority. I filed a formal complaint citing selective enforcement, requesting all HOA meeting minutes from the past 18 months. Professional, by the book, impossible to dismiss. That's when Victoria made her first catastrophic mistake. Mrs. Patterson, our sweet 70-something HOA secretary who still printed emails and filed them in actual folders, accidentally included Victoria's personal communications in the official response packet. God bless analog record keeping. There it was, printed in damning black and white. That Mexican guy is becoming a real problem. His truck-driving girlfriend makes the whole street look like a trailer park. We need to get rid of him before he brings down all our property values. Mexican guy. I'm Spanish-American, born in San Antonio, college-educated, and make decent money fixing million-dollar medical equipment. But to Victoria, brown skin plus pickup truck equaled undesirable element. The email trail got progressively worse. Victoria coordinating with board members to target specific residents, planning violation campaigns like military operations, discussing strategies to encourage voluntary relocation of families that didn't fit her demographic vision. She'd handed me a federal discrimination case on a silver platter. Maria found me that evening, spreading printed emails across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. The rustle of papers filled the silence as she read over my shoulder, her expression growing darker with each page. "Riley, this is..." She paused, and I caught something in her voice. Professional outrage. "This is actually serious civil rights violation stuff. This could destroy her. You really have dealt with property law before." She smiled mysteriously. Something like that. The satisfying click of my camera had captured every violation of Victoria's own rules over the past 2 weeks. Neighbors were starting to whisper support, quietly, carefully, but it was there. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly when I walked past. Mr. Johnson offered to share his own violation documentation. Victoria's stranglehold was loosening and she could feel it. But I underestimated how desperate that would make her. See, bullies have exactly two responses when their power gets challenged: slink away with their tail between their legs or go completely nuclear. Victoria was definitely nuclear material. The next morning brought a hand-delivered notice that made the parking restrictions look reasonable. Landscape maintenance standards, mandatory professional compliance required. If she couldn't get me on parking violations, she'd attack my dandelions. Game on. Victoria's new landscape manifesto read like a dictator's wet dream. Professional landscaping services required. Monthly inspections mandatory. Any weeds, non-conforming plants, or aesthetic violations subject to $200 fines. The kicker? All work had to be performed by HOA-approved vendors. Funny thing about small-town corruption, it's never subtle. Randy Pemberton of Pemberton Premium Landscaping was suddenly the only approved contractor in our 847 home community. Randy also happened to be Victoria's brother-in-law, a guy whose idea of landscape design involved a gas-powered leaf blower and the artistic vision of a parking lot. I stared at my violation notice while my coffee went cold. Dandelions visible from street constitute neighborhood eyesore. I counted exactly 3 dandelions in my entire front yard. Meanwhile, Victoria's lawn looked like Augusta National, because Randy had been maintaining it for free since 2019. The bitter taste of injustice was becoming familiar, but this time I remembered something useful. During my divorce, my ex-wife's environmental lawyer friend had ranted about HOAs trying to ban native plants. Turns out most states protect drought-resistant landscaping under conservation laws, something about water being more important than suburban aesthetic fantasies. Time to get educated. I spent my weekend at the county extension office, where a sun-weathered agent named Dave got genuinely excited about my HOA troubles. The man practically vibrated with environmental righteousness as he pulled out thick binders of state regulations. "Brother, you're sitting on a legal gold mine," Dave said, grinning like he'd just discovered oil. "Native plant landscaping is protected under the Water Conservation Act. No HOA can force you to waste water for their pretty grass obsession." The plan was beautiful in its environmental correctness. Convert my front yard to drought-resistant native plants, completely legal, socially responsible, and guaranteed to give Victoria an aneurysm. 3 days later, my suburban revolution began. Out went the water-hungry grass that required weekly chemical treatments. In came California poppies, lavender, and native bunch grasses that actually belonged in our desert climate. The sweet scent of lavender began replacing the chemical bite of lawn treatments that had dominated our neighborhood like some toxic perfume. Victoria materialized on day 2, clipboard clutched like a holy weapon. "Mr. Castellanos, this isn't lawn," she sputtered, gesturing at my partially completed native garden like I'd installed a meth lab. "Nope. Water conservation landscape, completely legal under state environmental protection laws." Her face cycled through several interesting colors. The HOA aesthetic guidelines clearly state, "County conservation guidelines trump local aesthetic preferences." Basic legal hierarchy. I handed her printed copies of the relevant statutes. "Would you like me to explain municipal code precedents, or should I draw you a diagram?" She snatched the papers, scanning with growing horror. You could practically hear her calculating Randy's lost revenue if this native plant heresy spread. "We'll see about this," she snapped, clicking away on heels that sounded like angry woodpeckers against the pavement. That afternoon brought the inspection ambush that almost made me laugh out loud. I'm spreading mulch around my new lavender when an official county pickup rolls up. Out steps Randy in a crisp county inspector polo, clipboard ready, channeling his inner bureaucrat. Problem was, I'd seen this same weak-chinned guy in Victoria's family photos. Same receding hairline, same shifty eyes, same general aura of incompetence. "County inspection," Randy announced without eye contact. "Received complaints about fire hazards and pest attraction." "Fantastic, I love official inspections." I walked over, wiping dirt from my hands. "Mind if I see your county credentials and ID number? Just want everything properly documented." Randy's fake confidence evaporated like morning dew. "My credentials?" "Yeah, standard procedure. Badge number, employee ID, vehicle registration. You know how it is with government accountability. The gravel crunched under Randy's increasingly nervous shuffling. I left my badge in the truck. No worries. What's your employee ID? I can verify it online right now. Phone out. County website loading. Finger poised to destroy his amateur hour performance. Randy mumbled something about needing to check his schedule and practically sprinted to his truck. Tires squealed as he fled the scene like a bank robber whose getaway car had broken down. Within an hour, 3 neighbors approached about native plant conversions. Mrs. Chen wanted lavender details. The Johnsons asked about replacing their water-guzzling roses. Victoria's panic at her fake inspector's exposure had finally cracked her support base. The morning silence filled with actual birdsong instead of gas-powered machinery. And people were noticing the difference, but cornered animals get dangerous. If Victoria couldn't control my landscaping, she'd manufacture violations faster than I could fight them. The next morning brought a violation blitz that would have impressed a military tactician. Victoria had clearly spent her weekend strategizing like a caffeinated general planning the battle of suburban compliance. 7 violations in 10 days, each one more spectacularly ridiculous than the last. The assault began Monday morning with the sweet smell of revenge disguised as municipal authority. Garbage can placement violation. My trash bin was apparently 3 inches too close to the street curb. $150 fine plus $50 administrative processing fee. Because apparently tyranny has overhead costs. Tuesday brought window covering violations. My bedroom blinds had inappropriate opacity levels that disrupted neighborhood visual harmony. I'm not kidding. She actually used the phrase visual harmony like she was critiquing a museum installation instead of standard-issue Home Depot blinds. Wednesday's masterpiece was driveway oil stains. The acidic smell of my morning coffee couldn't mask the bitter irony. Victoria's photographic evidence showed shadow patterns from my neighbor's oak tree. I went outside at the exact timestamp on her violation and watched the shadows recreate her stains in real time. The woman was either having a psychotic break or thought I was too stupid to understand how sunlight works. Thursday delivered pet noise complaints for my non-existent pets. Haven't owned animals since my divorce when my ex got custody of our dog along with half my assets. But apparently, my imaginary menagerie was disturbing the peace at 2 a.m. while I was dead asleep after a 14-hour hospital shift. Each violation carried escalating financial penalties: $150 base fine, $50 processing fee, $25 inspection costs. Victoria was generating revenue like a municipal parking meter with serious anger management issues. The paper cuts from sorting through violation notices were adding up, but I'd learned something crucial during my divorce: document everything, because unhinged people eventually hang themselves if you give them enough rope. Friday morning, I filed a public records request for all HOA financial documents. During my divorce proceedings, I discovered that most organizations have to maintain transparent books if they're spending other people's money. Homeowner associations can't hide their finances from the people funding them, though most residents never bother checking, which is exactly how suburban embezzlement flourishes. The response arrived the following week, and sweet mother of financial fraud, it was educational. Victoria's salary had mushroomed 340% over 3 years. Her consulting fees to various shell companies totaled $67,000 annually for services that apparently involved breathing and having opinions. Randy's landscaping contracts were 400% above market rate. I could hire a team of master gardeners from Beverly Hills for what we were paying that hack. But the real smoking gun was in the metadata on my violation photos. Victoria had backdated infractions using old surveillance images, then filed them as current violations. She'd literally photoshopped timestamps to create evidence for crimes that never happened on dates when I was 60 miles away saving lives with medical equipment. I was knee-deep in financial forensics when my doorbell rang. Maria found me surrounded by spreadsheets, calculator in one hand, highlighter in the other, looking like a deranged accountant plotting revolution. "You look like you're planning to overthrow a small government," she observed, settling beside me at my evidence-covered kitchen table. "Close. I'm documenting how our HOA president has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as neighborhood management." Maria studied my documentation with that intense focus I'd started recognizing. Her finger traced financial patterns while she made soft, analytical sounds that suggested serious mental processing happening behind those intelligent eyes. Riley, this isn't harassment anymore. This is organized theft. She paused, catching herself before elaborating. I mean, I've seen enough courtroom shows to recognize racketeering patterns when someone's running criminal operations through legitimate-looking businesses. The next morning delivered another anonymous gift, a manila envelope containing Victoria's personal financial records, credit card statements showing $47,000 in debt, real estate license suspension for ethics violations, divorce papers indicating her marriage was as fraudulent as her HOA management. The note was beautifully simple. She's stealing from all of us. Some of us see it. Time to act. A friend. Someone in Victoria's inner circle had flipped. The crack in her armor was spreading like spiderweb fractures in safety glass. That evening, Maria helped organize evidence while I calculated the scope of Victoria's theft. The rustle of papers mixed with the distant sound of sprinklers as we built an airtight case documenting years of systematic fraud. Most people would have moved away by now, Maria said, studying particularly damning bank records. Avoided the fight, cut their losses. Most people don't have girlfriends who understand complex financial crime from all those legal dramas. She smiled that mysterious smile again. Lucky you. But Victoria wasn't finished. Cornered animals don't surrender. They go nuclear. The violation notices stopped coming. The sudden silence felt ominous. I should have known she was planning something that would change everything. Victoria's sudden silence felt like the calm before a hurricane. 4 days without violations, threats, or manufactured emergencies. That's when I knew she was planning something nuclear. I was stress-eating leftover pizza and diving deeper into public records when I found the document that changed everything. Original 1995 HOA incorporation papers buried in county archives like buried treasure. The smell of stale pepperoni couldn't mask the adrenaline rush as I read the fee structure clause. Our legal maximum annual increase, 3% or cost of living adjustment, whichever was lower, period. No exceptions, no emergency overrides, no community improvement loopholes. My hands started shaking as I grabbed my calculator. Current monthly fees, $285. Legal maximum based on 1995 baseline with 28 years of lawful increases, $126. Victoria had been illegally collecting $159 per month from every household, times 847 homes, times 8 years of systematic theft. The calculator display made my stomach drop. $10.8 million stolen. This wasn't HOA abuse. This was the largest residential theft operation in county history. I called Maria with trembling fingers, my voice cracking like a teenager's. I need to tell you something, and you need to sit down. Riley, you sound terrified. What's wrong? Remember how I mentioned HOA problems? It's bigger than I thought, much bigger. The words tumbled out. Months of harassment, discrimination, manufactured violations, and now evidence of massive financial fraud. Maria, I need to ask you something directly. When you said you work in legal, what exactly do you do? Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I'm district attorney for Riverside County, she said quietly. I've been investigating HOA fraud for 2 years. Willowbrook Estates is my primary target case. The phone nearly slipped from my numb fingers. You're the district attorney? Riley, I've been building federal charges against Victoria Pemberton since before we met. RICO violations, organized theft, civil rights crimes. I never imagined I'd fall in love with someone living in the epicenter of my biggest prosecution. My brain struggled to process this revelation. The woman who'd been giving me legal drama advice was actually the county's top prosecutor. So when she destroyed your truck, she committed federal felony destruction of government property against a sitting DA while already under investigation for racketeering. Her voice shifted into prosecutor mode. Sharp, precise, deadly. She's finished, Riley, completely finished. The irony was breathtaking. I'd been documenting evidence thinking I was fighting alone, while the most powerful law enforcement official in the county was already building Victoria's federal prison cell. Why didn't you tell me? Ethics rules. I couldn't compromise an active investigation, even for someone I was falling for. But what you've documented independently is incredible. Victim impact evidence that'll destroy her in court. That evening, Maria arrived with banker's boxes of official evidence. the rustle of federal investigation files mixed with the distant hum of evening sprinklers as we spread 2 years of law enforcement work across my kitchen table. Financial records, surveillance photos, recorded calls, Victoria's empire documented in excruciating detail. "We're moving next week," Maria explained, organizing arrest warrants with professional efficiency. Public arrest, asset forfeiture, full federal response. "But I want to coordinate with your town hall meeting." "You want to arrest her in front of the entire neighborhood?" "I want to arrest her in front of cameras, witnesses, and every resident she's stolen from. Public crimes deserve public consequences." When someone runs a criminal organization disguised as civic duty, federal prosecutors don't just file charges, they orchestrate very public accountability, maximum deterrent effect for other wannabe suburban dictators. Victoria had spent months trying to drive me away. Instead, she'd been building her own federal case one crime at a time, and she had no idea the hammer was about to fall. The next 72 hours transformed my kitchen into a command center that would have impressed a Pentagon strategist. Maria arrived each evening with federal case files while I coordinated our civilian army like some caffeinated suburban resistance leader. "Here's the beautiful thing about RICO," Maria explained, spreading organizational charts across my coffee-stained table. The smell of Chinese takeout mixed with the intoxicating aroma of approaching justice. When criminals run ongoing enterprises disguised as legitimate businesses, federal law treats each individual crime as part of a larger conspiracy. She traced connection lines between Victoria, Randy, shell companies, and board members like a detective mapping a crime syndicate. Most corrupt HOA boards think they're just playing local politics with other people's money. They don't realize systematic theft across multiple properties triggers federal racketeering charges, and those carry penalties that would make a mafia don blush. My job was mobilizing the civilian army Victoria had accidentally created through years of systematic abuse. I started with Mrs. Chen, whose meticulous documentation of landscape harassment filled 2 overstuffed manila folders. The woman had photographed every dandelion Victoria claimed was destroying property values. That turns out she had 17 identical weeds that somehow only became violations on Mrs. Chen's property. Then the Johnsons, who documented every discriminatory parking citation with military precision. By Wednesday, 23 families had committed to our town hall ambush, each bringing evidence of targeted abuse. The group text thread exploded with shared horror stories that would have been funny if they weren't so systematically evil. "She charged us $400 for emergency roof inspection after a light drizzle," texted Mr. Rodriguez. Inspector turned out to be her cousin with a ladder and a clipboard. $600 fine for unauthorized exterior paint color, added Sarah Kim. "My house is literally identical beige to 12 others on my street. I checked with a paint chip." The technical setup required precision that would have impressed a film crew. I borrowed professional recording equipment from my hospital's training department, cameras that could capture a zit from 50 feet, wireless microphones sensitive enough to pick up whispered prayers, backup systems for our backup systems. The electronic hum of testing equipment mixed with my growing excitement as each piece fell into perfect position. Maria arranged for Detective Morrison from Financial Crimes to attend as an interested community member, just a concerned citizen who happened to carry federal arrest powers. Local news crews would cover our innocent budget transparency meeting without knowing they were about to witness the most spectacular HOA takedown in county history. "The key is letting Victoria destroy herself," Maria explained while adjusting camera angles. "She'll try controlling the narrative, attacking your credibility, maybe threatening lawsuits. Everything she says will be recorded and admissible in federal court." Thursday evening brought our technical rehearsal. Hidden cameras throughout the community center, audio levels tested and retested, sight lines optimized for maximum dramatic impact. I felt like a director preparing for the world's most satisfying courtroom drama. Maria taught me smartphone forensics that any resident could master. Evidence authentication, legal chain of custody, creating documentation that federal prosecutors would actually accept in court. Basic forensic accounting can expose HOA corruption that's been hidden for decades, because most boards assume residents will never check their math or follow proper procedures. Friday morning, I hand-delivered formal invitations to every household in Willowbrook Estates. Professional letterhead, official language, impossible to dismiss as amateur hour harassment. Community Budget Transparency Meeting, Sunday 2 p.m., Community Center, Light refreshments and financial revelations provided. Victoria tried calling an emergency board meeting to block our gathering, but legal precedent was crystal clear. Any HOA member could request community meetings for legitimate governance issues. Budget transparency definitely qualified as legitimate. By Saturday evening, our alliance had mushroomed to 87 committed attendees. People who'd been silently enduring Victoria's abuse were finally ready to speak publicly. The shared evidence folder contained 847 pieces of documented fraud, enough federal crimes to keep prosecutors busy through next Christmas. The satisfying weight of organized evidence felt like holding Victoria's entire criminal enterprise in my hands. Months of systematic documentation about to obliterate years of systematic theft. Tomorrow isn't just about personal justice, Maria said, reviewing arrest warrant details. This prosecution sends a message to every wannabe HOA dictator in America. Abuse your authority, steal from your neighbors, commit civil rights violations, and federal law enforcement will publicly destroy you. Victoria expected to control Sunday's meeting through intimidation and procedural manipulation. Instead, she'd walk into a federal sting operation with cameras rolling and an army of victims ready to testify. She'll try deflecting, claiming victimization, maybe even attempting to flee, Maria predicted, organizing final paperwork. But we have evidence, witnesses, and federal authority. Sunday morning brought that metallic taste of pre-game adrenaline mixed with the sweet anticipation of absolute victory. The trap was perfectly set. All we needed was our target. The weekend before our town hall meeting, Victoria transformed into a cornered animal with a law degree and access to municipal authority. If she was going down, she'd carpet bomb the entire neighborhood on her way to federal prison. Saturday morning brought an emergency board vote to fire our management company and restructure financial oversight. The acrid smell of desperation mixed with Victoria's increasingly cloying perfume as she scrambled to destroy 8 years of evidence before anyone examined it too closely. Problem was, Mrs. Patterson, our wonderfully old-school secretary who still made carbon copies of everything, had already preserved duplicate records in her basement filing system. Victoria's evidence destruction attempt was captured in beautiful 1080p detail by the HOA office security cameras. Just another federal obstruction charge for her growing collection. Sunday's masterstroke involved calling 911 to report that I was coordinating with criminal elements to intimidate legitimate community volunteers. The responding officer took one look at my organized evidence binders and Victoria's increasingly hysterical accusations, then politely suggested she might benefit from legal counsel. "Ma'am, documenting HOA violations isn't actually a crime," he explained, with the patient tone reserved for dealing with obviously unhinged suburbanites. Monday brought the financial Hail Mary, emergency special assessment of $3,000 per household for critical infrastructure improvements that nobody had requested or approved. The timing was transparently desperate. Extract maximum cash before federal asset freezes kicked in. But Victoria's true masterpiece of criminal stupidity came Tuesday morning at exactly 6:17 a.m. The metallic crack of my security alert shattered the morning calm as I watched our HOA president systematically destroy Maria's truck with a crowbar. Through my kitchen window, I observed 8 years of suburban tyranny culminating in pure, unhinged violence. Crash. Driver's side window exploded into diamond fragments. Screech. Get out. Carved deep into government paint with methodical rage. Clang. Side mirror dangling by wires like a broken limb. My 4K security system captured everything in prosecution quality detail. Victoria's face clearly visible, government plates perfectly readable, $8,400 in federal property damage accumulating with each swing of her suburban weapon. The irony was absolutely delicious. Victoria had spent months manufacturing imaginary violations against me. Now she'd committed an actual federal felony in broad daylight while federal-grade cameras captured every criminal stroke. During my divorce, I'd learned that destroying any government vehicle, police car, fire truck, postal service van, triggers automatic federal jurisdiction regardless of damage amounts. The federal government doesn't mess around when people attack its property, and security footage with clear identification makes conviction essentially guaranteed. Maria arrived 20 minutes later, surveying the carnage with prosecutor-level composure. Well, she just upgraded from financial crimes to federal property destruction. That's mandatory prison time with 0 plea bargain options. But here's what showcased Maria's prosecutorial brilliance. We didn't reveal her identity. Instead, I filed routine insurance claims and police reports listing unknown vandalism. Let Victoria think she'd successfully intimidated us, while federal investigators quietly added felony destruction charges to her expanding indictment. The community reaction was immediately devastating for Victoria's remaining support. Even her most loyal cronies couldn't defend destroying vehicles over neighborhood disputes. The sight of shattered glass and gouged metal convinced 3 board members to submit resignation letters within 24 hours. Local news picked up the story as HOA president goes too far, interviewing neighbors who'd witnessed years of escalating abuse. Victoria's public image shifted from strict community leader to unhinged suburban dictator with anger management issues. Wednesday brought Victoria's most desperately stupid decision yet, hiring a private investigator to research Maria's background. The PI's report must have been like opening a booby-trapped briefcase. Subject is District Attorney for Riverside County, currently leading federal investigation into HOA fraud. Strongly recommend immediate legal counsel and possibly witness protection. Normal people would have hired lawyers and fled the county. Victoria decided to double down on confrontation. Thursday's incident involved her attempting illegal entry to my property at 2 a.m., claiming evidence collection for pending litigation. My upgraded security cameras caught her trying to break into my backyard shed, flashlight trembling in her hands as she searched for anything to use against me. The crunch of gravel under her panicked footsteps mixed with muttered curses as motion-activated floodlights turned her midnight break-in into a perfectly illuminated crime scene. Even her attempts at stealth were criminally incompetent. Friday brought slurred, threatening phone calls to neighbors planning to attend Sunday's meeting. Victoria's voice, fortified with what sounded like liquid courage, promising serious consequences for residents who dared testify against her. Each threat was recorded and forwarded to Maria's office as additional witness intimidation evidence, yet another federal crime in Victoria's expanding catalog of felonies. By Saturday, Victoria had transformed from powerful community leader to panicked criminal facing enough federal charges to keep her in prison through menopause. Her attorney, blissfully unaware of our evidence mountain, advised aggressive public confrontation. Sunday morning would deliver her final performance before federal justice claimed its prize. Sunday morning arrived with the crisp anticipation of inevitable justice. While I set up recording equipment at the community center, Victoria was orchestrating her final desperate gambit 3 miles away at the local news station. Her press conference started at 10 a.m., 2 hours before our town hall meeting. I watched the live stream while adjusting camera angles, fascinated by the complete breakdown of someone who'd terrorized our neighborhood for 8 years. "I've been the victim of an organized harassment campaign," Victoria announced, looking surprisingly composed for someone facing federal racketeering charges. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Conservative blue suit, minimal makeup, the visual presentation of wounded authority. "A disgruntled resident has been coordinating with outside criminal elements to undermine legitimate community governance," she continued, reading from prepared notes. "Today, I'll expose the shocking truth about this conspiracy and the corrupt prosecutor who's been manipulating our legal system." The irony was breathtaking. Victoria planned to attack Maria's credibility without realizing she was building her own federal obstruction case in real time, on camera, with local media as witnesses. Meanwhile, Maria was coordinating federal response from the DA's office. Asset forfeiture warrants prepared. Financial crimes detectives positioned. Federal agents ready to execute arrests the moment Victoria committed her final crimes on camera. Once federal prosecutors decide to make examples of corrupt HOA boards, they bring overwhelming force, Maria had explained during our final planning session. Public arrests, asset seizure, media attention, maximum deterrent effect for other wannabe suburban dictators nationwide. By 11 a.m., our community center was packed beyond fire code capacity. 89 residents had shown up, many bringing additional family members for moral support. The air hummed with nervous energy as people who'd been silently suffering Victoria's abuse prepared to speak publicly for the first time. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, her evidence folders organized like legal briefs. The Johnsons had brought printed timeline charts showing 8 years of discriminatory violations. Even quiet neighbors I'd never seen at HOA meetings had come armed with documentation and grim determination. Detective Morrison arrived exactly on schedule, looking like any concerned resident except for the federal arrest warrant folded in his jacket pocket. 2 additional financial crimes investigators scattered throughout the crowd, invisible to casual observation, but ready to prevent any escape attempts. Local news crews set up professional equipment, expecting routine coverage of community budget discussions. They had no idea they were about to witness the most spectacular HOA takedown in state history. The shared digital evidence folder had grown to 847 pieces of documented fraud. Photographs, financial records, email communications, recorded threats. Every resident Victoria had targeted over 8 years had contributed to her downfall. She charged my neighbor $500 for emergency sidewalk inspection after someone complained about imaginary cracks, whispered Mr. Garcia, showing me photos of perfectly normal concrete. Same inspector who turned out to be her nephew's landscaping buddy. The sweet scent of coffee and pastries couldn't mask the metallic taste of approaching justice as residents compared horror stories. Victoria had been running identical scams on dozens of families. Inflated vendor charges, manufactured emergencies, selective enforcement based on demographics and personal grudges. Professional court reporter hired. Check. Backup recording systems tested. Check. Evidence displays arranged for maximum visual impact. Check. Security positioned to prevent disruption or flight. Check. At 11:30, Victoria's private investigator delivered his background research on Maria. I can only imagine Victoria's face when she learned that her mystery girlfriend target was actually the district attorney who'd been building her federal case for 2 years. Normal people would have fled the county. Victoria decided to attack a sitting prosecutor during a federal investigation. At 11:45, she canceled her attorney's advice to settle quietly and instead demanded he prepare for aggressive public confrontation to expose the conspiracy. Her lawyer, still unaware of the evidence mountain waiting to crush his client, agreed to support her suicidal strategy. The psychological setup was perfect. Victoria expected to control our meeting through intimidation and procedural manipulation, just like she'd controlled HOA business for 8 years. Instead, she'd walk into a federal sting operation with cameras rolling and an army of victims ready to testify. She's going to try deflecting blame, claiming persecution, maybe even attempting to discredit the entire legal system, Maria predicted over our final strategy call. Everything she says will be recorded and used against her in federal court. At 11:55, residents were still arriving, many carrying signs reading, "Transparency Now" and "End HOA Corruption." The community center parking lot overflowed onto neighboring streets as our quiet suburban neighborhood prepared for its moment of reckoning. Victoria's car pulled up at exactly noon, right on schedule for her final performance. She stepped out in full battle armor, designer suit, confident posture, briefcase full of desperate lies. She had absolutely no idea that federal justice was waiting for her inside. The trap was perfectly set. Our target had arrived. Game time. The community center fell silent as Victoria Pemberton swept through the entrance like a conquering general entering occupied territory. Designer navy suit, perfectly styled hair, briefcase clutched like a weapon. She looked like someone preparing to deliver a decisive victory, not commit federal crimes on live television. She surveyed the packed room with visible satisfaction, clearly expecting the same intimidated silence that had enabled 8 years of tyranny. Instead, she found 89 residents armed with evidence and grim determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced, taking control of the microphone without invitation, "before we address today's unfortunate gathering, I have important information about the criminal conspiracy that's been targeting your elected leadership." Local news cameras focused on her confident presentation. She had no idea they were recording her final moments of freedom. "Riley Castellanos has been coordinating with outside agitators to undermine legitimate community governance," she continued, reading from prepared notes. "His mysterious girlfriend is a known associate of organized crime who's been manipulating our legal system for personal gain." I sat calmly in the third row, surrounded by neighbors I'd helped organize, watching Victoria build her federal obstruction case in real time. The sweet irony. She was about to demand my expulsion from the community where I'd found love, purpose, and the strength to fight back. "Mr. Castellanos must be expelled from Willowbrook Estates for the safety and security of law-abiding families," Victoria declared, pointing directly at me with prosecutorial authority. That's when I stood up, walked to the front of the room, and placed a banker's box full of evidence on the table beside her. "Thank you for that introduction, Victoria. Now let me share some actual facts with our community." The first document I projected was our 1995 HOA incorporation papers showing legal fee limits. Audible gasps filled the room as residents calculated how much Victoria had illegally stolen from their families. $10.8 million in unauthorized fee collection over 8 years, I announced, letting the number sink in. That's $12,750 stolen from every household in Willowbrook Estates. Victoria's confident facade cracked as financial evidence filled the projection screen. Bank records showing shell company transfers, vendor contracts inflated by 400%, personal expenses charged to HOA accounts. "This is ridiculous," Victoria snapped. "These documents are fabricated by criminals." "Including the audio recordings?" I pressed play on my laptop. Victoria's voice filled the room through professional speakers. "That Mexican guy is becoming a real problem. We need to get rid of him before he brings down our property values." The silence was deafening. Even Victoria's remaining supporters looked shocked by the naked racism in her own words. "Now let's watch some security footage," I continued, queuing up the truck destruction video. The 4K footage played on the large screen in devastating detail. Victoria clearly visible, systematically destroying Maria's pickup with methodical violence. Glass exploding, metal screeching. "Get out!" carved into government property. Victoria's face went completely white as she realized her felony had been recorded in prosecution quality detail. "The truck she destroyed belongs to my girlfriend, Maria Thornfield," I announced, pausing the video on a clear shot of Victoria's face. "I don't care what some random woman," Victoria started. "District Attorney Maria Thornfield," I continued, "who's been investigating HOA fraud countywide for the past 2 years. Victoria literally froze mid-sentence, crowbar dangling in the projected image, as the community center erupted in shocked murmurs. That's when Maria entered from the side door in full prosecutor formal wear, followed by Detective Morrison and 2 federal agents. The camera flashes exploded like lightning as Maria approached the microphone with federal authority. "Mrs. Victoria Pemberton, you are under arrest for destruction of government property, embezzlement, racketeering, and civil rights violations under federal statute," Maria announced, her voice carrying the weight of the entire justice system. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through absolute silence as federal agents placed Victoria under arrest in front of cameras, community members, and local media. "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Morrison continued the Miranda warnings while Victoria stared in complete shock, finally understanding the magnitude of her miscalculation. The community erupted in sustained applause as Victoria was led away in federal custody, 8 years of tyranny ending in handcuffs and federal charges. Residents lined up to share their own victimization stories with news crews, creating a powerful record of systematic abuse. Mrs. Chen's emotional testimony about discrimination, the Johnsons describing years of targeted harassment, families calculating their stolen money and demanding justice. "When HOA corruption reaches federal crime levels, justice moves fast and hits hard," Maria told reporters, standing beside evidence displays that documented Victoria's criminal enterprise. The community immediately voted to dissolve the existing board and implement democratic reforms. Transparent budgeting, term limits, equal enforcement procedures, everything Victoria had prevented through 8 years of authoritarian control. Victoria's reign of suburban terror was over. Federal justice had claimed its prize in the most public way possible, sending a clear message to corrupt HOA boards nationwide. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates had transformed into the community we'd always deserved. Victoria pled guilty to federal charges rather than face a public trial that would have demolished her remaining dignity. 18 months in federal prison, plus $347,000 in restitution, including triple damages under RICO statutes. Her husband lost his pension due to criminal association clauses, and her real estate license was permanently revoked. The financial recovery was swift and satisfying. Every household received full refunds of illegally collected fees. Average recovery of $2,847 per family. Federal asset forfeiture added another $89,000 to our community fund, while Victoria's seized properties covered all legal expenses. But the real transformation was psychological. People who'd been afraid to speak up for years were now actively participating in genuine democratic governance. Our new board, elected with actual votes instead of intimidation, meets monthly with full transparency and community input. Mrs. Chen was elected treasurer and immediately implemented quarterly financial reviews. The Johnsons joined the architectural committee and eliminated discriminatory enforcement. Even quiet neighbors who'd never attended meetings became involved in community decisions. The native plant landscaping I'd started caught on like wildfire. 12 families converted to drought-resistant gardens, reducing our collective water usage by 40% while creating habitat for returning wildlife. The sweet scent of lavender and the sound of morning birds replaced the chemical smell and noise of gas-powered maintenance. Guest parking restrictions were completely eliminated. Vendor contracts were open to competitive bidding, reducing costs by 60%. Randy's monopoly was broken, and actual professional landscapers now maintain our common areas for half the price. My relationship with Maria deepened through our shared commitment to justice. Fighting corruption together had revealed character traits that matter more than romantic chemistry: integrity, courage, the willingness to stand up for others even when it's difficult. "You know what I learned from this?" Maria said one evening as we walked through our transformed neighborhood. "Most HOA abuse happens because good people stay silent. When residents organize and document violations, corrupt boards crumble pretty quickly." I'd become an accidental advocate for HOA reform, teaching workshops on evidence documentation and legal rights. My story inspired similar actions in 17 communities across 3 counties. Maria's office opened a dedicated HOA fraud unit after discovering how widespread the corruption was. The national media attention led to state legislation strengthening penalties for board corruption and requiring financial transparency. Our case became a textbook example of how federal RICO laws apply to organized residential theft. But the most satisfying transformation was personal. I'd found my sense of belonging in the community, not through submission to authority, but through fighting for the principles that make neighborhoods worth living in. Victoria's empty house became a community garden where residents grow vegetables to donate to local food banks. Former enemies now work together on shared projects. Children play where violation notices once created fear. The Willowbrook Wildlife Sanctuary, funded by recovered stolen money, offers educational programs for local schools about conservation and community cooperation. Our annual Native Plant Festival attracts visitors from neighboring communities who want to learn about sustainable landscaping and democratic HOA governance. Remember, Maria tells community groups during our reform presentations, bullies only win when good people stay silent. Document everything, organize your neighbors, and never underestimate the power of ordinary citizens fighting for justice. The sound of children playing echoes where violations once dominated. The sweet scent of community barbecues replaces the bitter taste of injustice. Most importantly, I hold keys to a home that's finally, truly mine. Not because I own property, but because I helped create a community worth defending. Victoria learned that stealing from your neighbors and abusing authority carries serious consequences when federal prosecutors get involved. Her suburban empire crumbled because one person refused to stay silent, documented everything, and discovered that justice sometimes comes with handcuffs and camera flashes.